Alright, what's going on everyone? Today we're going to take a look at another World Championship winning deck in Magic the Gathering's history, and this time it is Angel Stasis, the deck that won the World Championship in 1994. There wasn't really a format. The tournament took place a year after Magic released, so it was just every set that were released to that point. The tournament would take place at Gen Con in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and the deck would be piloted by Zak Dolan, who would, after this tournament, become Magic the Gathering's first ever World Champion. So Angel Stasis is a bit of a mess. Before we get into it, I just want to show you the deck list and pay attention to the number of copies of each card the deck plays. There's a lot of singles, so we'll be brief to just get through this. But basically, this was a control lockdown deck. The key cards for the lockdown were Stasis and Kismet. Stasis causes each player to skip their untap step, and Kismet causes your opponent's permanents to enter tapped. You do need to pay 1 per turn to maintain the stasis lock, but so long as you can do that, your opponent doesn't get to untap and all of their stuff enters tapped, which fully locks them out of the game. And remember that even lands enter tapped, which will lock the opponent out of mana entirely. The deck reinforces this lock with Siren's Call, Winter Orb, and Meekstone. Siren's Call forces creatures to attack, so if your opponent has a big blocker, they cannot leave it on defense. It'll be forced to attack and then get stasis locked. Meekstone and Winter Orb are lesser forms of the lock that can be used until you get to stasis, or if stasis is destroyed. Speaking of which, the deck has Recall and Regrowth to return things from the graveyard to hand in case key pieces get destroyed. So how does the deck win? With one of the most powerful creatures in Magic at the time, Serra Angel. It's a 5-mana 4/4 with vigilance basically. Not only was this a powerhouse in the format, but it avoided the deck's own stasis lock by not tapping when it attacked. This means you could stasis lock the board, but continue to beat the opponent down with your Angel. It also played Howling Mine, Black Vice, and Ivory Tower. Howling Mine makes each player draw an extra card every turn. Black Vice deals damage to the opponent equal to their hand size -4. So this is also a way to win the game after the stasis lock because there's no way for your opponent to cast anything, meaning their hand builds up and they just take damage every turn. Ivory Tower is basically the same thing as Black Vice, but the opposite. Instead of the opponent losing life, you gain life instead, which really adds up even without the combo. The rest of the deck is all about controlling the board until you can get your combo pieces down. It played Swords to Plowshares, Icy Manipulator, Wrath of God. The first removes a creature, the second can tap one down every single turn, and also works well with locking down things with Stasis, and Wrath as a board wipe. It had more creature control with Time Elemental, Old Man of the Sea, and Control Magic. Time Elemental could bounce a creature every turn. Old Man can tap to gain control of small creatures, and you can choose not to untap it to remain control of that creature. And Control Magic just straight up yoinks the creature, steals it, it's yours now, which not only deals with the creature but gives you an attacker. It also had Mana Drain, Armageddon, and Disenchant. Mana Drain is basically a counterspell with lots of words. Armageddon blows up lands. Note that this deck is full of moxes, so blowing up lands isn't the end of the world. And Disenchant might seem weird, but artifacts and enchantments were very common in the early days of Magic, so this is the equivalent of like main boarding a creature removal spell by today's standards. It also got to play some of the most powerful cards ever printed: Ancestral Recall, Time Walk, and Time Twister. Recall draws 3 cards for 1 single mana. That's kind of insane. Time Walk takes an extra turn for just 2 mana, and Time Twister shuffles hands and graveyards into libraries, and each player draws 7. So for 3 mana, you totally reset hands, and it's particularly powerful when combined with Black Vice and Ivory Tower. The deck could also clone things with Clone and Vesuvan Doppelganger, which could be used to copy your opponent's creatures if they were useful, but also you can just copy your own Serra Angels if necessary. There's also Birds of Paradise and Lay Druid, which are rampers, and speaking of ramp, since this was vintage, it was filled with moxes. These are just 0 mana rocks, and it played 1 of each, in addition to Black Lotus, Mutavault, and Soul Ring. Yep, Soul Ring might be familiar to Commander players, and this was legal in this tournament. Black Lotus, of course, 0 mana, can be sacrificed for 3, and Mana Vault is 1 mana and taps for 3. Difficult to untap, but that's okay. This also means the deck played the entirety of the Power 9, so No wonder it won. For mana, the deck had Savannah, Tropical Island, and Tundra. These are literal dual lands. They tap for 2 colors and there's no drawback whatsoever. It also played Strip Mine and Library of Alexandria. Strip Mine is a land that blows up other lands, and the library can be tapped to draw a card if you have 7 cards in your hand already, and it could also be untapped with Ley Druid to draw multiple cards per turn. As always, we don't go too in depth when it comes to the sideboard, but it had Circle of Protection Red to hate out red decks, and these Circle of Protections were so common that it also had Magical Hat and Sleight of Mind to answer your opponent's color hosers. It had Copy Artifact and Floral Spasm to hate out artifacts, In the Eye of Chaos for instance, Presence of the Master for enchantments, and Winter Blast for aggro creatures. Power Sink was an extra counter. Reverse Damage could redirect damage, like from a Channel Fireball combo for example, and Karma punished players for playing black. There's also Chaos Orb, Diamond Valley, and an extra Kismet just in case. And that's it. A Stasis lockdown deck with a flying vigilance attacker and a ton of control to stall the game. That is Stasis Angels, the deck that won the first World Championship in 1994. If you like this video, I have an entire playlist dedicated to these World Championship decks, and you can find a link to it in the description below, so check that out if you're interested. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, I hope this was interesting, and I will see you in the next one.